Welcome back to Sean Thinking Out Loud. Today we're talking about something people love to pretend they already understand. How to know yourself. And right there, half the audience probably think this is going to turn into one of those soft little self-help episodes where someone tells you how to journal under moonlight, forgive your inner child, and breathe through your trauma while drinking tea that tastes like boiled landscaping. No, we're not doing that. This is not about finding your authentic self in the modern social media sense, where people change identities faster than the army changes acronyms. This is about something much harder. This is about looking at yourself without flinching. It's about asking what you actually believe, what you actually do, what you actually avoid, what you're lying about, what you're good at, and what you're terrible at. What keeps happening in your life that you keep blaming on other people? And what kind of person you might become if you stop treating your own life like somebody else's responsibility? The foundation for this episode comes from Jordan Peterson's work. Now, Peterson is one of those figures who makes people lose their minds, which usually means he's touched something important. Some people hear the name Jordan Peterson and immediately think he's the second coming of common sense. Other people hear his name and act like someone released mustard gas in the faculty lounge. That alone tells you something. When a psychologist tells people to clean up their lives, tell the truth, take responsibility, and stop blaming the world before they have even put their own house in order, you would think that would be basic adult instruction. But in modern society, basic adult instruction is now considered controversial. Because apparently we've created a culture where telling people to grow up is treated like a hate crime. Peterson's central idea, at least for this episode, is simple. You're not one clean, simple, perfectly understood creature. You're complicated. You have instincts. You have habits. You have resentments. You have talents. You have fears. You have things buried in your past that will steer your present. You have dreams you refuse to admit. You have lies you tell other people. And worse, you have lies you tell yourself. That's the dangerous part, because when you lie to other people, at least there's a chance they'll catch you. When you lie to yourself, you can build an entire life on bad information and call it confidence. That's how people end up 35, 45, 55 years old, sitting in the wreckage of their own decisions, still insisting they just never got a fair shot. Maybe some things were unfair. Life is unfair. Congratulations, you've joined the species. But unfairness doesn't erase responsibility. And self-knowledge begins when you stop asking, who can I blame, and start asking, what part of this is mine? That question is where most people tap out, because the modern world has trained people to think identity is the same thing as self-knowledge. It's not. Identity is what you claim. Self-knowledge is what you can prove under pressure. Identity is what you put in the bio. Self-knowledge is what shows up when you're tired, angry, broke, rejected, stressed, embarrassed, tempted, or scared. Identity is easy. Self-knowledge is expensive. It costs pride. It costs excuses. It costs fantasy. It costs your favorite story about yourself. That's why most people don't really want it. They want affirmation. They want validation. They want a label that makes them feel important. They want someone to tell them that every failure in their life was caused by society, their parents, capitalism, patriarchy, racism, trauma, oppression, or whatever political vending machine is currently dispensing excuses. Sometimes those things matter. Sometimes people get dealt a bad hand. But here's the part nobody wants to hear. Even if the hand was bad, it's still your hand. You still have to play it. And sitting there yelling at the dealer for 40 years isn't a strategy. Peterson's approach hits hard because it pushes the burden back where it belongs, on the individual. And that's why it's hated. Because modern politics, modern education, modern therapy culture, and modern social media all make a fortune teaching people that their pain gives them moral authority. Peterson walks in and says, maybe your pain gives you responsibility. That's a very different message, and it's a better one. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't sedate you. It doesn't hand you a participation trophy for surviving your own bad decisions. It asks you to become stronger. That's not cruelty, that's respect. Today's episode will move through 5 parts. First, we're going to separate identity from self-knowledge. Because if you confuse those two, you can spend your whole life announcing who you are while never actually becoming anybody worth respecting. Second, we're going to talk about your past, not as an excuse, not as a prison sentence, as evidence. Your past tells you what patterns you repeat, what wounds you carry, what victories you ignore, and what unfinished business still has its boot on your neck. Third, we're going to talk about personality, temperament, the big 5. Not as a little online quiz so you can tell your friends you're an introverted dragon empath with strategic moon energy. No, as a map of how you act, react, work, fight, avoid, love, lead, and fail. Fourth, we're going to get into truth, because you can't know yourself while lying. You can't build character on fraud, and you can't set your house in order while pretending the mess is someone else's decorating style. Fifth, we're going to talk about the future, not fantasy, not vibes, a real future. The kind you write down, plan for, sacrifice for, and move toward. Because knowing yourself isn't just about understanding who you are, it's about becoming responsible for who you could be. So let's get into it. Before we go any further, let me plug one of my books, The Unmaking of the American Citizen. If you want to understand how modern politics turns citizens into managed categories, demographic cattle, and grievance machines, this is the book. It's about neoliberalism, identity politics, and the conservative renewal. It's about what happens when a country stops forming citizens and starts producing consumers, activists, dependents, and professional complainers. You can find The Unmaking of the American Citizen by Shawn Armstrong through Super Gringo Books. If you want clean political theory without the university fog, go get it.
Every time I tried to stand, they pushed me down. Now I've had enough, can't take it all around. It's time to be strong, time to be clear. No more being used, it's time to repair. No more Mr. Nice Guy, I'm through. Time to stand up, let the world see. No more being weak, it's time to break. I'm done with the pain, I'll take my place.
Let's start with the first problem. Most people don't know themselves. They know their labels, they know their preferences, they know their complaints, they know their traumas, they know their political tribe, they know their favorite slogans, they know what they want other people to believe about them, but that's not the same thing as knowing yourself. That's branding. And branding is what companies do when the product is ordinary. You can see it everywhere now. People introduce themselves through categories. I'm this, I identify as that. I support this, I oppose that. I'm on this side, I'm against those people, and they think that's self-knowledge. No. That's inventory tagging. That tells me where you want to be placed in the warehouse. It doesn't tell me who you are. You want to know who someone is, ask what they do when nobody is rewarding them. Watch what they do when telling the truth costs them something. Watch what they do when they have power over someone weaker. Watch what they do when they lose. Watch what they do when they're told no. Watch what they do when they're wrong. That's where the real person shows up. Not in the slogan, not in the profile picture, not in the moral performance, in conduct. This is one reason Peterson's message irritates people. It doesn't start with your public identity. It starts with your responsibility. He looks at the individual and asks, what are you doing with your life? What lies are you living? What disorder have you tolerated? What burden have you refused to carry? What dragon are you avoiding? That's uncomfortable because it shifts the conversation away from the crowd and back to the person. Modern people hate that. They'd rather talk about systems, institutions, history, economics, politics, and social forces. All of those things matter, but they're also very convenient hiding places. You can hide behind the systems forever. You can blame institutions forever. You can blame history forever. And some people do. They become experts in everything except themselves. They can diagnose the entire country, but they can't explain why their own life is a pile of unpaid bills, broken relationships, bad habits, and resentment. That's not intelligent. That's evasion with vocabulary. Self-knowledge begins when you stop giving yourself credit for your intentions and start judging yourself by your patterns. That sentence matters. Your intentions are often fiction. Your patterns are evidence. You say you value discipline. But what do you do? But what do you do every morning? You say family matters. But what do you call them? Do you show up? Do you keep your word? You say you want success. But do you work like success is coming? You say you want health. But what do you eat? How do you sleep? What do you do with your body? You say you love truth. But do you tell it when it makes you look bad? Or do you only love truth when it's a weapon pointed at someone else? That's where self-knowledge gets ugly, because the first step isn't discovering your hidden greatness. The first step is discovering your own bullshit. That's not inspirational, but it's necessary. You can't improve what you refuse to see. You can't correct what you keep defending. You can't become better while treating every criticism as an attack. And you can't know yourself if every uncomfortable fact about you has to be escorted out of the room by security. Peterson talks a lot about responsibility because responsibility forces contact with reality. A child can live in fantasy. An adult can't. A child can say, I want. An adult has to ask, what must I do? A child can blame. An adult has to answer. And in a sane culture, growing up means moving from appetite to responsibility. But we no longer live in a sane culture. We live in a culture that markets irresponsibility as freedom. Do whatever you feel. Call yourself whatever you want. Reject every limit. Rewrite every standard. Blame every failure on oppression. Avoid judgment. Avoid shame. Avoid duty. Avoid pain. Avoid sacrifice. Then when people become anxious, depressed, lonely, purposeless, and weak, everyone acts confused. How did this happen? It happened because you can't remove duty from life and expect people to become strong. You can't remove standards and expect people to develop character. You can't remove truth and expect people to know themselves. Self-knowledge isn't self-worship. That needs to be said because the modern self-help industry is built on self-worship. You're enough. You're perfect as you are. You deserve everything. Never change for anyone. Cut off anyone who doesn't validate you. Protect your peace. Live your truth. Half of that sounds nice until you realize it can easily become a permission slip for narcissism. What if you're not enough? What if you're not perfect as you are? What if you do need to change? What if the people criticizing you are right? What if your peace is just avoidance? What if your truth is just a lie you got emotionally attached to? Real self-knowledge doesn't flatter you. It disciplines you. It tells you where you're weak. It tells you where you're strong. It tells you where you're dangerous. It tells you where you're useful. It tells you where you're wasting your life. That's where Peterson's rule about comparing yourself to who you were yesterday matters. The point is not to stare at other people's lives and torture yourself. The point is to establish a truthful baseline. Who were you yesterday? What did you avoid yesterday? What did you improve yesterday? What did you repeat yesterday? What did you make worse? That's manageable. That's measurable. That's adult. Because if you compare yourself to everyone else, you'll always find someone richer, stronger, smarter, better looking, more successful, more popular, more talented, and more connected. Congratulations, you discovered math. There are billions of people on the planet. Someone is better than you at almost everything. If that destroys you, the problem isn't your excellence. The problem is your standard. The better question is this: are you better than you were? Are you more honest? Are you more disciplined? Are you more useful? Are you less bitter? Are you less cowardly? Are you less chaotic? Are you carrying more responsibility than before? Are you telling fewer lies? Are you making fewer excuses? That's self-knowledge. It's not glamorous. It's not a TED Talk. It's not a hashtag. It's a daily contact with your actual condition. And your actual condition is where all serious improvement begins. Here's a simple test. Take a notebook, write down 10 things you believe are true about yourself. Not what you hope is true, not what you want others to think, what you believe is true. Then next to each one, write the evidence. If you write, I'm disciplined, give examples. If you write, I'm loyal, give examples. If you write, I'm honest, give examples. If you write, I'm a hard worker, give examples. If you can't give evidence, you don't have self-knowledge. You have a press release. And nobody needs another press release, especially from themselves. Now do the same thing with your faults. Write 10 things you know you're wrong with you. And don't get cute. Don't write fake weaknesses like I care too much or I work too hard or I'm too loyal. That's job interview garbage. Write the real stuff. I procrastinate. I avoid conflict. I drink too much. I lie to avoid consequences. I blame people. I quit when things get hard. I'm resentful. I'm jealous. I'm lazy. I'm careless with money. I use anger to avoid shame. I use humor to avoid honesty. I chase approval. I sabotage good relationships. I tolerate bad people because I'm afraid to be alone. That's the beginning. Not the end, the beginning. Because once you can name the thing, you can fight the thing. You can't fight fog. You can fight a named enemy. This is why knowing yourself requires courage. It's not soft, it's not feminine, it's not masculine, it's not political. It's not religious by necessity, though religion has dealt with this better than most modern psychology departments want to admit. It's human. You're a creature capable of great good and real evil. You're capable of sacrifice and cowardice. You're capable of love and cruelty. You're capable of truth and deception. Knowing yourself means admitting both sides. The person who only sees his goodness is dangerous. The person who only sees his darkness is broken. The adult sees both and chooses discipline. That's the first lesson. Identity is what you claim. Self-knowledge is what survives investigation. If you want to know yourself, stop announcing and start examining. The second part of knowing yourself is your past. And this is where people usually split into two camps. One camp says your past doesn't matter. Just move on. Get over it. Forget it. Drive on. That sounds tough, and sometimes it's useful, but it's incomplete. The other camp says your past explains everything and excuses everything. Your childhood, your trauma, your parents, your teachers, your relationships, your environment, your wounds, your oppression, your pain. That camp turns the past into a life sentence. Also stupid. Different direction, same ditch. Your past matters, but it's not your master. Your past shapes you, but it doesn't own you. Your past gives evidence. It doesn't issue final orders. That's the correct balance. Peterson's self-authoring framework is useful here because it forces people to write about their past, present, and future. That matters because writing isn't just expression. Writing is organization. When you write clearly about your life, you start separating facts from emotions, patterns from accidents, lessons from excuses, pain from identity, and that's valuable because most people don't have a past. They have a pile of emotional debris they keep tripping over. Ask someone about their childhood, and half the time they don't give you a history. They give you a courtroom argument. Here's why I'm the way I am. Here's who failed me. Here's who hurt me. Here's why I can't trust. Here's why I'm angry. Here's why I never got my shot. Some of that might be true, But if your memory only functions as a defense attorney, you're not learning from your past, you're using it to avoid sentencing. And yes, sometimes people were genuinely damaged. Abuse is real. Neglect is real. Betrayal is real. War is real. Loss is real. Humiliation is real. Poverty is real. Family chaos is real. Bad things happen to people who didn't earn them. That's true. But the question isn't only what happened to you, the question is what made you believe. Because that's where the past keeps operating. Maybe you were betrayed, so you learned never to trust. Maybe you were humiliated, so you learned to attack first. Maybe you were ignored, so you learned to perform. Maybe you were abandoned, so you learned to cling. Maybe you were controlled, so you learned to rebel against every authority, even good authority. Maybe you grew up in chaos, so now peace feels suspicious. Maybe you grew up around weakness, so now you despise vulnerability. Maybe you grew up around anger, so now you confuse aggression with strength. Maybe you grew up around lies, so now honesty feels dangerous. That's the real work. Not just what happened. What did you conclude? What role did your younger self write in response? And is that rule still running your life? People do this all the time. A man gets rejected young and he spends the next 30 years trying to prove women don't matter while secretly organizes his whole personality around female approval. A woman gets betrayed once, now every decent man has to stand trial for crimes committed by a previous idiot. A kid grows up poor and later becomes successful but still lives with scarcity panic, like the lights are about to get shut off. A soldier comes home from war, but part of him is still standing in the street waiting for the next impact. A child grows up with an unpredictable parent and later marries unpredictability because chaos feels familiar. That's not mysticism. That's pattern recognition. And if you don't know the pattern owns you. Knowing yourself means treating your past like intelligence preparation of the battlefield. That's a military way to say, study the terrain before you walk into an ambush again. Your past tells you where you're vulnerable, where you overreact, where you shut down, where you get stupid, where you get sentimental, where you get arrogant, where you confuse fear with wisdom, where you confuse comfort with safety, where you confuse intensity with love, where you confuse resentment with justice. That information is useful, but only if you're honest enough to gather it. Here's an exercise. Write your life in chapters, not 20 pages of whining, chapters. Age 0 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18, 19 to 25. Then keep going in blocks that make sense. For each chapter, answer 5 questions. What happened? What did I learn? What did I start believing? What did I start avoiding? What strength came out of that period? The last question matters because people love to inventory their wounds and ignore their strengths. That's another kind of dishonesty. If you survived something hard, it may have cost you, but it may have built something too. Maybe you became observant. Maybe you became independent. Maybe you became tough. Maybe you became funny. Maybe you became adaptive. Maybe you became protective. Maybe you became disciplined. Maybe you learned to read people. Maybe you learned to work. Maybe you learned not to quit. Good. Write that down too. The point isn't to worship trauma. The point is to recover truth. All of it. This is where people need to stop confusing explanation with excuse. Your past may explain why you do something. It doesn't automatically excuse you continuing to do it. If you were raised in chaos and now create chaos, that explains the habit. It doesn't make everyone else responsible for tolerating it. If you were betrayed and now can't trust, that explains your suspicion. It doesn't give you permission to punish innocent people. If you were controlled and now hate authority, that explains your rebellion. It doesn't make every boss, teacher, leader, parent, pastor, commander, or institution your enemy. If you were neglected and now demand constant attention, that explains the hunger. It doesn't make other people your emotional feeding tube. There's the hard line. Compassion for your past, responsibility for your present. Both, not one, both. Because compassion without responsibility becomes weakness. Responsibility without compassion becomes cruelty. And despite the emotionally underdeveloped internet thinks, adults need both. Peterson's emphasis on self-authoring matters because it forces you to stop living as a vague reaction. You become an author, not in the fantasy sense where you control everything. You don't. Life will still hit you, People will still betray you. Bodies will still break. Plans will still fail. Governments will still do stupid things because apparently that's their natural habitat. But you can still write a better response. You can still decide what your suffering means. And you can still decide what you carry forward. You can still decide what ends with you. That's powerful. A lot of people say, this is just how I am. No, sometimes that means this is the adaptation I refuse to update. A child learns to survive by being quiet. Then as an adult, he calls it peace while avoiding every necessary confrontation. A child learns to survive by being loud. Then as an adult, she calls it confidence while bulldozing every room she enters. A child learns to survive by pleasing people. Then as an adult, he calls it kindness while secretly resenting everyone he helps. A child learns to survive by trusting no one. Then as an adult, she calls it wisdom while living behind emotional barbed wire. Those adaptations may have protected you once, but a tool can become a cage. That's why knowing yourself includes asking this question. What behavior helped me survive then, but is hurting me now? That question will wreck some people because it strips away the romance. It forces you to admit that your favorite defense mechanism may be outdated equipment. It worked in one war. It doesn't belong in every room. If you carry combat posture in every relationship, don't act shocked when people stop approaching you. Some people don't have enemies. They have habits that make everyone look like one. Your past also reveals what you value. Look at what still hurts. Look at what makes you angry. Look at what you still regret. Regret isn't always useless. Sometimes regret is a moral signal. It tells you what you violated your own standard. Maybe you betrayed someone. Maybe you abandoned a duty. Maybe you lied. Maybe you quit. Maybe you were cruel. Maybe you were cowardly. Maybe you wasted years. Good. Don't wallow in it. Study it. Regret can either become rot or instruction. The difference is responsibility. And while we're here, let's be blunt. Some people use therapy language to protect themselves from moral judgment. They call selfishness boundaries. They call cowardice self-care. They call avoidance healing. They call emotional instability being authentic. They call manipulation communicating needs. They call laziness burnout. Sometimes those words describe real things. Often they're just camouflage. Modern people learn the vocabulary of recovery without developing the discipline of recovery. That's a problem. Peterson's framework pushes against that. It says write it down, name it, examine it, take responsibility, build a plan, stop floating. If you want to know yourself, your past is one of your best sources, but you have to read it correctly. Don't read it like a victim looking for evidence that life owes you. Don't read it like a prosecutor looking for someone to hate. Don't read it like a coward looking for permission to quit. Read it like a soldier studying the map. Where have I been hit before? Where did I fail? Where did I adapt? Where did I become strong? Where did I become bitter? Where did I learn the wrong lesson? Where did I abandon something important? Where did I survive something that should have killed the weaker version of me? That's useful. That's how the past becomes intelligence instead of chains. You're not required to be the person your worst moment trained you to become. You're not required to keep obeying the emotional laws written by a younger, scared, wounded version of yourself. You can revise the order. But first you have to know what order was given. That's self-knowledge. Let me take a minute to plug the Dragon Kempo 2.0 series. This is my martial arts system in book form, broken down through belt manuals and practical instruction. The series includes manuals from yellow belt all the way through black belt levels, plus Dragon Kempo 2.0 practical kata and applications. This isn't tournament fantasy. This is about structure, movement, discipline, self-defense, practical kata, and training the body to act under pressure. If you train, teach, or want a martial arts system with teeth, look up Dragon Kempo 2.0 by Shawn Armstrong. Because pretending violence is solved by good intentions is how people get hurt. Now let's talk about personality. This is where the internet has done what it always does. It takes something useful, strips out the discipline, turns it into entertainment, then watches people use it as an excuse. Personality tests can be useful, but most people treat them like astrology with better fonts. I'm this type, so I can't help it. I'm an introvert, so I don't need people. I'm anxious, so I can't be challenged. I'm highly agreeable, so I can't say no. I'm low conscientiousness, so organization just isn't me. No, stop that. Personality isn't a prison. It's not a moral pardon. It's not a medical exemption from adulthood. It's a map. And maps are useful because they show terrain. You don't walk the route for you. Peterson's understands my self-assessment uses the Big Five aspect model. The Big Five are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The model is widely used in psychology because it describes broad patterns of human personality. And if you understand those patterns, you can stop treating every one of your habits like a mysterious act of God. Let's go through them in plain English. Openness. This has to do with creativity, imagination, interest in ideas, novelty, abstraction, art, and exploration. High openness people tend to like ideas. They like possibilities. They like big concepts. They like weird questions. They can be creative, flexible, and inventive. They can also be impractical, scattered, novelty addicted, and allergic to routine. Low openness people tend to prefer the familiar. They like tradition, structure, concrete tasks, and tested methods. They can be stable, practical, and dependable. They can also be rigid, unimaginative, and suspicious of anything new. Neither side is automatically superior. The question is whether you know your tendency. If you're high openness, you may need discipline, schedules, and people who force your ideas to land on Earth. If you have low openness, you may need to practice flexibility before you become the human equivalent of a locked filing cabinet. Conscientiousness, this one matters a lot. It has to do with orderliness, discipline, reliability, planning, impulse control, work ethic, and follow-through. High conscientiousness people get things done. They keep lists. They plan. They finish. They organize. They show up early and wonder why everyone else is a walking administrative failure. They can build careers, maintain households, run units, lead teams, and complete long projects. They can also become controlling, rigid, judgmental, and unable to relax without scheduling relaxation like a military operation. Low conscientious people are more spontaneous. They may be flexible. They may be less bothered by disorder. They may adapt quickly, but they often procrastinate, miss details, avoid structure, and leave messes behind them like a personal weather system. If that's you, don't turn it into a cute personality trait. Fix it. You may never become a spreadsheet-loving machine, fine. But you can use a calendar, you can clean the room, you can pay the bill, you can keep the appointment, you can build external systems because your internal systems are apparently being run by raccoons. Extraversion, this is about social energy, assertiveness, enthusiasm, reward sensitivity, and stimulation. High extraversion people are energized by interaction. They like talking, leading, performing, persuading, competing, and being around people. That can be powerful. They can motivate others. They can lead in public. They can build networks. They can also dominate conversations, chase attention, speak before thinking, and confuse noise with leadership. Low extroversion people are introverted people, may be quieter, more reserved, more reflective, and more comfortable alone. That can be powerful too. They may think before speaking. They may observe more carefully. They may work deeply. They may avoid pointless social theater, which is a mercy to everyone, but they can also isolate, avoid necessary communication, and mistake positivity for depth, or passivity for depth. Again, map, not excuse. If you're extroverted, learn restraint. If you're introverted, learn courage. Agreeableness. This one causes problems, especially in modern politics and relationships. Agreeableness has to do with compassion, politeness, cooperation, empathy, trust, and concern for harmony. Highly agreeable people want people to get along. They care about suffering. They're often kind, helpful, cooperative, and conflict avoidant. That sounds nice, and it can be, but too much agreeableness can turn you into a doormat with a pulse. You say yes when you mean no. You avoid necessary conflict. You let bad people manipulate you. You confuse being nice with being good. Those are not the same thing. Goodness sometimes requires confrontation. Goodness sometimes requires saying no. Goodness sometimes requires protecting order from people who exploit compassion. Low agreeableness people are more competitive, blunt, skeptical, confrontational, and less emotionally soft. That can be useful. They can negotiate hard. They can make difficult decisions. They can stand firm. They can fight when fighting is necessary. They can also become selfish, harsh, suspicious, cruel, and impossible to live with. If you're low agreeableness, you may need to practice compassion before you become the kind of person people only tolerate because they have to. If you're high agreeableness, you may need to practice boundaries, conflict, and assertiveness before the world eats you alive while thanking you for your cooperation. Neuroticism. This is emotional viability, or volatility. Anxiety, stress sensitivity, negative emotion, threat detection. People high in neuroticism feel danger faster. They worry more. They anticipate problems. They may be sensitive to rejection, conflict, uncertainty, and disorder. That can be painful, but can also make people alert, careful, and responsive to risk. There's a reason anxious people sometimes see problems before the cheerful idiots walk into them smiling. But high neuroticism can also become paralysis, catastrophizing. Big word there. Emotional flooding, overreaction, constant fear. Living like every inconvenience is a hostage crisis. Low neuroticism people are calmer, more emotionally stable, harder to rattle. That's useful under pressure. But they can also underreact, miss danger, dismiss other people's distress, and treat serious problems like minor weather. Again, this issue isn't whether the trait is good or bad. The issue is whether you know how it operates in you. This is where self-knowledge becomes practical. If you're high in neuroticism, you need routines that reduce unnecessary chaos. Sleep, exercise, order, clear communication, financial discipline, stable relationships. You can't live like a drunken circus and then wonder why your nervous system is screaming. If you're low in conscientiousness, you need external structure, lists, calendars, accountability, deadlines, a clean workspace. You need systems because your natural tendency is not going to rescue you. If you're high in openness, you need to finish something. Ideas are cheap. Finished work isn't. If you're low in openness, you need to expose yourself to new ideas without acting like every unfamiliar thought is a communist invasion. If you're high in agreeableness, you need to learn conflict. If you're low in agreeableness, you need to learn mercy. If you're extroverted, learn silence. If you're introverted, learn speech. That's the adult use of personality. You identify the terrain, then you train against your weaknesses. The immature use is saying, that's how I am. Nobody cares. That sentence has excused more mediocrity than bad schools. This is how I am should be the beginning of an investigation, not the end of the conversation. Fine, that's how you are. Now what? Are you going to build around it? Are you going to correct it? Are you going to compensate for it? Are you going to warn people about it? Are you going to take responsibility for the damage it causes? Or are you going to walk through life acting like everyone else has to adapt to your unmanaged temperament? A lot of people want to know themselves because they think it will make life easier. It might not. It might make your life harder at first, because once you know yourself, you lose excuses. If you know you procrastinate, missed deadlines aren't mysteries. If you know you avoid conflict, resentment isn't surprising. If you know you need structure, chaos isn't bad luck. If you know you're emotionally reactive, burned relationships aren't random. If you know you're harsh, loneliness isn't confusing. If you know you chase novelty, unfinished products aren't tragic accidents. Self-knowledge removes the luxury of pretending you don't know what's happening. It's why people avoid it. Here's another hard truth. Your strengths and weaknesses often come from the same place. The thing that makes you good at one job may make you terrible in one relationship. The thing that makes you brave in combat may make you emotionally clumsy at home. The thing that makes you compassionate may make you easy to manipulate. The thing that makes you creative may make you unreliable. The thing that makes you disciplined may make you rigid. The thing that makes you calm may make you dismissive. The thing that makes you assertive may make you obnoxious. You can't just ask, what am I good at? You have to ask, where does this strength become a liability? That's a real self-knowledge. In the military, you learn that every weapon system has capabilities and limitations. You don't pretend a machine gun is a sniper rifle. You don't pretend a tank is a helicopter. You don't pretend light infantry has the same strengths as armor. You use the tool according to its nature. People aren't machines, but the principle applies. Know your capabilities, know your limitations, then stop volunteering for missions that require skills you refuse to develop. And stop avoiding missions that would force you to grow. Personality gives you information. Character is what you do with it. That distinction matters. Personality is temperament. Character is discipline. Personality is your starting equipment. Character is your training record. Personality tells you what comes naturally. Character tells you what you've built. A naturally calm coward is still a coward. A naturally aggressive man without discipline is still a liability. A naturally compassionate person without boundaries is still irresponsible. A naturally intelligent person without work ethic is still useless. A naturally disciplined person without humility is still dangerous. Character is what happens when temperament submits to truth, duty, and repeated action. So how do you know yourself through personality? You ask practical questions. When do I perform best? What environments make me worse? What kind of people bring out my worst habits? What kind of work drains me? What kind of work strengthens me? Where do I need structure? Where do I need freedom? Where do I need courage? Where do I need restraint? Where do I lie to avoid discomfort? Where do I use my strengths to cover for my failures? That's the work. Not, I'm a type. Not, I'm an empath. Not, I'm just wired this way. Know the wiring, then build the house so it doesn't burn down. Now we get to the truth. This is the part that ruins everything for people who enjoy lying to themselves professionally. You can't know yourself if you lie. You can't. That doesn't mean you need to announce every private thought to the entire world like some emotional exhibitionist on social media. Truth doesn't mean vomiting your internal mess into public and calling it courage. But it does mean you stop falsifying reality. You stop saying things you don't believe. You stop agreeing when you know you disagree. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You stop pretending you're helpless when you're not. You stop pretending you're strong when you're weak. You stop pretending you're weak when you're responsible. You stop editing your life story to protect your ego. Peterson's rule about telling the truth, or at least not lying, matters because lying corrupts perception. That's the part people miss. A lie isn't just a false statement. It's an attack on reality. And reality doesn't negotiate well. Reality has a nasty habit of showing up later with interest. You lie about your finances and the debt shows up. You lie about your marriage and then the resentment shows up. You lie about your health and the body shows up. You lie about your competence and the job exposes you. You lie about your courage and pressure exposes you. You lie about your values and your actions expose you. That's not karma, that's consequence. Self-deception is especially dangerous because it allows you to live inside a false command briefing. Imagine sending a platoon into a city with bad intelligence. Wrong map, wrong enemy strength, wrong terrain, wrong routes, wrong assumptions. People die that way. Now apply that to life. You tell yourself you're fine when you're falling apart. You tell yourself your drinking is normal. You tell yourself your anger is righteous. You tell yourself your laziness is fatigue. You tell yourself your bitterness is wisdom. You tell yourself your cowardice is patience. You tell yourself your envy is justice. Then you make decisions based on that bad intelligence. And when the operation fails, you act surprised. Truth isn't optional if you want to live well. It's the operating system. You can reject it, but then don't complain when your life starts crashing. And yes, truth can hurt. Good. Pain isn't always the enemy. Sometimes pain is information. The pain of truth is better than the comfort of a lie, because a lie keeps you asleep while the damage continues. The truth wakes you up. Maybe rudely, but waking up is still better than dying in bed. This is also where Peterson's idea of setting your house in order matters. People love criticizing the world. They love criticizing government, culture, schools, the media, the rich, the poor, men, women, America, the West, capitalism, religion, everything. And some criticism is valid. I criticize institutions all the time. There's plenty to criticize. You can hardly swing a dead cat in public life without hitting incompetence, corruption, cowardice, or some overpaid idiot with a title. But Peterson's point isn't that you can never criticize the world until your life is perfect. That would be impossible. The point is that your criticism becomes suspect when your own life is in obvious disorder and you refuse to confront it. If your room is a disaster, your relationships are broken, your habits are trash, your finances are chaos, your word means nothing, and your emotional life looks like a bar fight, maybe pause before announcing your plan to fix civilization. That doesn't mean poor people can't have political opinions. It doesn't mean wounded people can't speak. It doesn't mean imperfect people must be silent. If that were true, nobody could talk, which honestly might improve cable news, but that's another episode. The point is priority. Start where you have direct responsibility. Start with what's in reach. Start with your room, your body, your speech, your schedule, your work, your family, your debts, your obligations, your promises, your lies. Because if you can't govern yourself, your grand theories about governing society deserve suspicion. Self-knowledge requires you to ask, where am I performing? Performing means acting for an audience instead of living for conviction. And modern society is built on performance. People perform compassion, they perform outrage, they perform confidence, they perform victimhood, they perform toughness, they perform intelligence. They perform spirituality, they perform patriotism, they perform rebellion, they perform humility, they perform trauma, they perform morality. It's exhausting just listing it. Social media made every person the star, director, producer, and victim of their own little propaganda channel. And after a while, people forget where the performance ends and the person begins. Knowing yourself requires shutting off the audience. Ask yourself who you are when nobody's watching. Not who you are when the camera's on. Not who you are when the group approves. Not who you are when enemies are looking. Not who you are when applause is available. Who you are when obedience is boring. Who you are when the right thing is invisible. Who you are when there's no credit. Who you are when the lie would be easier. Who you are when the truth makes you smaller. That's the test. A person who only tells the truth when it benefits isn't truthful. He's strategic. A person who's only loyal when loyalty is convenient isn't loyal. He's transactional. A person who's only brave when backup is guaranteed isn't brave. He's socially insured. A person who's only moral when being watched isn't moral. He's supervised. Self-knowledge strips that away. It asks, what are you without the supervision? That's a serious question. Now let's bring this down to practical ground. If you want to know yourself, start tracking your lies. That sounds harsh. Good. Track them. For 1 week, write down every time you say something false. Every exaggeration, every fake agreement, every excuse, every convenient omission. Every time you say, I forgot, when you really avoided. Every time you say, I didn't have time, when you really didn't prioritize. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not. Every time you say, I don't care, when you clearly care. Every time you pretend ignorance to avoid responsibility. Every time you flatter someone you resent. Every time you present yourself better than you behaved. Do that for a week and you'll learn things. Probably unpleasant things, but useful things. Then track disorder. Where's your life visibly out of order? Your room, your desk, your finances, your sleep, your marriage, your diet, your training, your paperwork, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your parents, your work performance, your spiritual life, your anger, your attention span, your phone addiction. Don't pick all of them at once. That's how people fail and then write inspirational posts about healing. Pick one, fix one, clean one room, pay one bill, make one call, apologize once, schedule one appointment, throw out one pile of trash, start one training routine, stop one obvious lie. That's how order begins, not with a life transformation montage, with one obedient action. Peterson's clean your room message gets mocked because shallow people hear it as housekeeping. It's not housekeeping, it's sovereignty, because you can impose order on the small domain you actually control. Can you look at chaos and take responsibility for reducing it? Can you handle the visible mess before trying to lecture the invisible world? Can you build competence at the scale available to you? That's not small, that's foundational. A person who can't manage a room probably can't manage a life. A person who can't manage a life probably shouldn't be trusted with a movement. And yet modern politics is full of people who can't manage their own emotions trying to redesign society. No wonder everything smells like smoke. Truth also reveals desire. People lie about what they want. They say they want peace, but they keep choosing drama. They say they want love, but they choose people who confirm their wounds. They say they want success, but they avoid the work. They say they want respect, but they behave in ways that make respect impossible. They say they want freedom, but they refuse the discipline that makes freedom sustainable. They say they want truth, but they punish everyone who tells it. Knowing yourself means watching what you actually choose. Your choices reveal your hierarchy of values, not your words, your choices. If you say your family comes first, but they get your leftovers, your family doesn't come first. If you say health matters, but you abuse your body every day, health doesn't matter enough. If you say faith matters, but it never governs your behavior, faith is decoration. If you say country matters, but you know nothing about its histories, laws, or duties, patriotism is costume jewelry. If you say excellence matters, but you tolerate your own laziness, excellence is a poster on the wall. Your choices are confessions. Pay attention. This is where the truth hurts in a useful way. A lot of people don't have a self-knowledge problem, they have an obedience problem. They know what they should do, they just don't want to do it. They know the relationship is bad. They know the habit is destructive. They know the job is beneath their ability. They know the debt is irresponsible. They know the lie is rotting them. They know the apology is overdue. They know the body needs work. They know the room is a mess. They know. They just prefer the short-term comfort of not acting. That's not confusion, that's weakness dressed as complexity. Self-knowledge without action becomes self-obsession. That's another modern trap. People analyze themselves endlessly. They know their attachment style, their trauma response, their personality type, their love language, their political identity, their diagnosis, their triggers, their patterns, their childhood wounds, their nervous system, their inner child, their shadow's inner child, their inner child's attachment style. At some point, stop building the museum and start fixing the house. Information is supposed to lead to action. If it doesn't, it becomes entertainment. And self-analysis as entertainment is just narcissism with homework. Truth, order, action. Those three belong together. Truth shows you the mess. Order gives you direction. Action changes the condition. That's how you begin to know yourself as a living person, not as a concept. Because you don't truly know yourself until you see what you do under discipline. You might think you're strong. Start training. You might think you're honest. Stop lying. You might think you're responsible. Take on a burden. You might think you're loving. Sacrifice. You might think you're brave. Tell the truth when your voice shakes. You might think you're disciplined. Keep one promise every day for a year. Then we'll talk. Let me plug Countering Islamic Jihad, a scholarly exploration of contemporary counterterrorism approaches. This book is for people who want serious thinking about terrorism, ideology, strategy, resilience, and modern security threats. It's not cable news shouting. It's not fantasy policy. It's a serious look at contemporary counterterrorism written by someone with military experience, Iraq and Afghanistan deployments, and graduate-level counterterrorism training. If you want to understand threats instead of emotionally reacting to headlines, look up Countering Islamic Jihad by Shawn Armstrong. Because bad ideas backed by violence don't appear because polite people refuse to name them. Now we get to the future, because knowing yourself isn't just digging through the past or naming your traits. That's incomplete. If all you do is examine yourself, you may become more aware and still remain useless. The point is to become someone, not to endlessly explain why you're stuck. Peterson's future authoring idea matters here because it asks you to imagine a meaningful, productive future, then plan backward. That sounds simple. It's not. Most people don't have a future. They have wishes. A wish isn't a plan. A wish is what lazy people call hope when they don't want accountability. I want to be in better shape. I want to write a book. I want a better marriage. I want more money. I want peace. I want respect. I want purpose. Fine. What are you doing Monday morning? That question separates adults from fog machines. A future requires specificity. What do you want? Why do you want it? What will it cost? What must you do? What must you stop doing? What must you start doing? What must you become? What must you disappoint? What comfort must die? What habit must be buried? What skill must be built? What responsibility must be accepted? This is why most people avoid real planning, because real planning exposes the price, and most people don't want the price. They want the image. They want the identity of success without the schedule. They want the respective discipline without the repetition. They want the authority of wisdom without the suffering. They want the body without the training. They want the book without the writing. They want the marriage without the sacrifice. They want the country without the citizenship. They want the future without the work. No, the future is built by trade. You give up lesser things for greater things. That's adulthood. Peterson often frames life as a movement between chaos and order. Chaos is the unknown. Order is the known. Too much chaos destroys you. Too much order suffocates you. A good life requires both. You need enough order to stand, enough chaos to grow. That's the useful framework for knowing yourself. Ask yourself, where do I have too much chaos? Then ask, where do I have too much dead order? Too much chaos looks like addiction, unstable relationships, unpaid bills, no schedule, constant drama, emotional explosions, moving from crisis to crisis and calling it life. Too much order looks like rigidity, fear of change, sterile routine, dead ambition, controlling behavior, and a life so safe it becomes a slow burial. You need to know which direction you lean. Some people need to clean the room. Some people need to leave the room. Some people need discipline. Some people need courage. Some people need stability. Some people need adventure. Self-knowledge tells you which prescription fits. A meaningful future isn't built around pleasure. Pleasure matters, rest matters, joy matters, but pleasure can't carry a life. Pleasure is too weak. Meaning is stronger. Meaning comes from responsibility, sacrifice, competence, love, truth, service, faith, creation, and struggle. That's why people who live only for comfort become miserable. Comfort isn't a mission. Comfort is what you enjoy after the mission has earned it. If comfort becomes the mission, you become soft, bored, resentful, anxious, and shallow. Then you start inventing problems because the human being can't live without challenge. Take away real struggle, and people manufacture fake struggle. That's half of modern politics. People with historically comfortable lives cosplaying oppression because meaning has been replaced by performance. To build the person you could become, start with the heaviest responsibility you're currently avoiding. That's often where meaning is hiding. The conversation you avoid, the work you avoid, the apology you avoid, the training you avoid, the truth you avoid, the decision you avoid, the grief you avoid, the ambition you avoid, the duty you avoid. There's usually a door in your life you keep walking past. You know it's there, you know what's behind it, and you keep pretending you're still gathering information. No, you're stalling. Open the door. This doesn't mean you become reckless. It means you become honest. You don't quit your job tomorrow because you had a feeling. You write the plan, you build the skill, you reduce debt, you prepare, you move with discipline. You don't blow your marriage because you're unhappy. You tell the truth, you seek counsel. You examine your own conduct. You do the work. You don't start 10 life goals at once because motivation visited you at 2 a.m. You pick the next right target. Then you attack it. A future self should be demanding. If your future self asks nothing of you, it's just fantasy. A real future self judges you. Good. You need that. You need an internal standard above your current appetite. You need to be able to ask, would the person I'm trying to become do this? Would he eat this? Would he say this? Would he spend this? Would he tolerate this? Would he lie here? Would she quit here? Would he waste this hour? Would she avoid this duty? That question builds alignment. It turns identity into practice. Not, I'm disciplined. Do disciplined things. Not, I'm honest. Tell the truth. Not, I'm strong. Train. Not, I'm responsible. Carry the load. Not, I'm serious. Live seriously. This is also where comparison has to be handled correctly. Comparing yourself to other people can be useful if it inspires humility and learning. It becomes poisonous when it creates envy, resentment, and despair. Look at someone better than you and ask, what can I learn? Don't ask, why do they have what I don't? What I don't? That question creates bitterness, and bitterness is poison. It tells you other people's success is an insult. It tells you achievement is theft. It tells you excellence is oppression. It tells you your failure is moral evidence against the world. That mindset will ruin you. You can see it in politics constantly. People don't want to become better. They want to drag down anyone who did. That's not justice. That's envy with a policy proposal. If you want to know yourself, study your envy. Envy reveals desire mixed with resentment. You see someone successful and you feel anger. Good. Ask why. What do they have that you want? Status, money, discipline, talent, marriage, fitness, freedom, recognition, influence, courage, peace? Then ask the adult question, what would it actually cost to pursue that? Maybe you don't want the thing. Maybe you only want the appearance. Maybe you want the body but not the diet. The book but not the writing. The marriage but not the compromise. The rank but not the responsibility, the business but not the risk, the platform but not the criticism, the authority but not the burden. Good. Now you know yourself better. The future also requires sacrifice. Peterson work returns again and again to the idea that sacrifice is built into meaningful life. You give up something now for something better later. That's civilization in one sentence. Planting crops is sacrifice. Raising children is sacrifice. Marriage is sacrifice. Military service is sacrifice. Writing a book is sacrifice. Training is sacrifice. Education is sacrifice. Faith is sacrifice. Citizenship is sacrifice. Without sacrifice, you become a creature of appetite, and creatures of appetite don't build anything worth inheriting. They consume. They complain. They decay. Ask yourself what you're sacrificing for. Everyone sacrifices. Even lazy people. They sacrifice the future for the present. They sacrifice health for comfort. They sacrifice respect for convenience. They sacrifice truth for approval. They sacrifice competence for entertainment. They sacrifice family for ego. They sacrifice freedom for addiction. So the question isn't whether you sacrifice. The question is, what altar are you using? That'll tell you who you are. A man who sacrifices comfort for duty becomes one kind of person. A man who sacrifices duty for comfort becomes another. A woman who sacrifices vanity for truth becomes one kind of person. A woman who sacrifices truth for vanity becomes another. A citizen who sacrifices convenience for liberty becomes one kind of citizen. A citizen who sacrifices liberty for comfort becomes a subject. Choices shape the person. Repeated choices harden into character. Character becomes destiny. That sounds dramatic because it is. Your small decisions aren't small if they repeat. They're votes for the person you are becoming. So build a future authoring plan. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, write it down. What does your life look like if you take responsibility? Where do you live? What's your health like? What's your work like? What relationships have improved? What have you stopped doing? What skills have you built? What debts have you paid? What duties have you accepted? What habits define your mornings? What does your speech sound like? What are you known for? Who trusts you? Who depends on you? What do you create? What do you protect? What do you refuse? Then write the opposite. What happens if you don't change? This is important. People need a vision of heaven and hell. Not necessarily theological in this context, though theology understands this deeply. You need to know what you're moving toward and what you're trying to avoid. If you keep lying, what happens? If you keep drinking, what happens? If you keep avoiding work, what happens? If you keep wasting money, what happens? If you keep blaming others, what happens? If you keep choosing chaos, what happens? If you keep confusing discipline, what happens? Write it, make it ugly, because it probably is ugly. The future you refuse to face is still coming. Better to meet it with a plan than with excuses. Here's the final point of this segment. You don't know yourself by staring inward forever. You know yourself by acting in the world, under pressure, under responsibility, under discipline. A person who's never carried weight doesn't know how strong he is. A person who's never tempted doesn't know how honest he is. A person who's never been tested doesn't know how brave he is. A person who's never sacrificed doesn't know what she loves. A person who's never failed doesn't know what he's made of. So don't hide from difficulty. Difficulty reveals. And then, if you're serious, difficulty refines. That's how you know yourself. Not by mood, not by label, not by fantasy, by tested action. Before we close, let me plug 2 books. First, Messiah, my critique of the Obama administration across the economy, foreign policy, immigration, and healthcare. Second, From Jobs to Justice, the Trump Era Examined, my review of the Trump administration across trade, energy, foreign policy, defense, veterans affairs, and national policy. If you want a political commentary that doesn't treat you like a child waiting for approved talking points, look up Messiah and From Jobs to Justice by Shawn Armstrong. Read them, argue with them, throw them at your liberal cousin if necessary, metaphorically, mostly. So let's bring this home. How do you know yourself? You stop confusing identity with self-knowledge. You stop mistaking labels for character. You stop thinking your feelings are automatically truth. You stop using your past as an excuse. You study it as evidence. You look at your personality as a map, not as a prison, not as a badge, not as a cute excuse for being difficult. You tell the truth, or at least you stop lying. You set your house in order, not because the room is the whole world, because it's a part of the world directly under your command. And if you can't bring order there, maybe your plan to fix society should wait until after you locate the laundry. You build a future, a real one, written down, paid for through sacrifice, measured through action, corrected through truth. You compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not because yesterday is the highest standard, but because yesterday is the honest starting line. You ask what you're becoming every day, not what you claim, not what you feel, not what your tribe applauds, what you're becoming, because that's the question that matters. Modern culture tells people to express themselves. Peterson tells people to discipline themselves. Modern culture says, find your truth. Peterson says, tell the truth. Modern culture says, you're valid. Peterson says, become responsible. Modern culture says, your pain explains you. Peterson says, maybe your pain is calling you to grow. That's why this message cuts. It refuses to worship weakness. It refuses to flatter resentment. It refuses to make your life someone else's job. And that's exactly why people need it. Self-knowledge isn't gentle. It's not safe. It's not always comforting. It can humiliate you. It can expose you. It can force apologies out of you. It can make you quit things you enjoy. It can make you comfort people you fear. It can make you abandon stories that kept you warm for years. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is living as a stranger to yourself, reacting without understanding, failing character, aging without wisdom. That's a bad trade. So here's the assignment. Write your past, study your patterns, name your faults, name your virtues. Take a serious personality inventory. Ask what you're avoiding, tell one truth you've been dodging, put one piece of your house in order, choose one responsibility, build one plan, then repeat. That's not glamorous. That's how a life gets rebuilt, brick by brick, day by day, truth by truth. And remember this, you're not obligated to remain the most convenient version of yourself. You're not obligated to obey every fear, every wound, every habit, every appetite, every resentment, every excuse, every label, or every lie you inherited. You can become better, but not by pretending, not by branding, not by whining, not by blaming, not by waiting for the world to rearrange itself around your unresolved problems. You become better by telling the truth and carrying responsibility. That's how you know yourself. And more importantly, that's how you become someone worth knowing. This has been Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm Shawn Armstrong. Think harder, tell the truth, and clean up the part of the world with your name on it.